Is Christianity just simply an emotional crutch? Is it just blind faith? Is there any evidence for the reality and the truth of the Christian faith? I'm joined today by Dr. Gavin Ortlund, who is a Christian scholar and a pastor, to unpack some of those questions. Gavin, in previous episodes, we've been talking about questions that you like to ask, that when we answer those questions, they point to the credibility of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And one of those questions is, are good and evil objectively real? How does that question direct us towards Christianity?
Yeah. One of my favorite books is called That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis, and it's a novel. And there's a character named Mark in that book who's captured by evil people and he's tortured. But he's not tortured physically. It's a kind of psychological torture where they put him into rooms where everything is a little bit out of proportion. The chairs are all a little bit different sizes. Or, there's dots on the ceiling and on the floor, and they're a little bit out of alignment, but almost in alignment. And they're trying to sort of mess with his mind. And they show him famous paintings that have a little difference to them, like The Last Supper, but there's a lot of beetles under the table, things like this. It's kind of this bizarre, scene in this book. But he says that as they're trying to kind of sour him with what he calls the crooked, there rises up in his mind this strong awareness of what he calls the straight or the normal. And it says he's not thinking in moral terms, but C.S. Lewis says it was his first moral experience where he realizes the durability and the power of these ideas of good and evil. And to me, it's a powerful image of how deep-seated inside our hearts and our minds and our psyche the awareness of good and evil is. We all have a sense of this, and the skeptic, someone who has no faith in God, presumably has to look at that instinct and say, well, that's a product of evolution. It helped our ancestors survive. And I find that to be a tough answer. I'm not satisfied by that, because to me, these experiences of good and evil, we all sense a sense of transcendence to them. And it's tough to identify why they are objective if they just helped, if our sense of good and evil is just there because it helped animals survive in the past, why are they objective, unchanging? Why would they be the same regardless of what people thought? If there's just nothing beyond nature. All of us want to look at certain types of behavior, certain historical events, like say, the Holocaust. All of us want to be able to say that was objectively wrong. It doesn't matter what someone's opinion is. It was just evil. You shouldn't do that. It is terrible. But if a naturalistic account of our world is the best way to put it all together, I guess my question would be, how is that event different qualitatively from a shark eating a seal or a Venus flytrap liquidating a bug? The strong devour the weak, that's the explanation of everything. Here we are. What is our basis for sitting in judgment upon evil is really not just something we dislike, but something we actually object to if we don't have something beyond nature by which to appeal to. This was C.S. Lewis's great argument, and I think you feel the weight of it when we feel the struggle with evil. One of the greatest arguments against Christianity is the problem of evil. How can a good and loving God allow there to be so much evil and suffering? And that's a tough argument that needs to be engaged sensitively. But even in the expression of that argument, C.S. Lewis was saying, I never stopped to consider why I was so bothered by the evil of the universe. You don't find a line crooked unless you're comparing it to a straight line. Why does it bother me so much? And I see that this argument, to me, I see in the arts, in movies, for example. Almost every movie ever made is about good versus evil. It's the same plot over and over and over. Good and evil are fighting. Good is usually losing for a good chunk of the movie, and then good wins at the end. And it's so common, we almost don't even notice that it's happening in every story we ever tell. And the question is, well, why do we keep telling this story? And movies that don't end like that, movies where evil wins at the end, it bothers us. We feel a sense of that shouldn't be how it is. And I think that's a testimony. It's a clue to something at the core of reality. There's some movies where it works out like that, where evil ends up winning in the end. But then, as you press into the details of the movie, you find the whole appeal, the whole emotion that the movie's appealing to is, isn't this so tragic? Mm-hmm. And there the question comes up, well, why is it so tragic? It's kind of like Richard Dawkins in one passage arguing against God, and he appeals to a bus crash in which children were killed, and he calls it a meaningless tragedy. And I just want to ask him, meaningless tragedy, if it's meaningless, why is it a tragedy? I agree that it breaks the heart to consider, why does it break the heart? The very struggle that we have with evil seems to suggest that there's something beyond nature that stabilizes and grounds good and evil as objective realities. And to me, that's one very powerful testimony for the truth of the Christian faith.